Let's move on to the Middle East, where things are surprisingly, there's a conflict, you guys. There's a conflict in the
What?
Middle East.
In the Middle East?
Not in
Yeah.
the Middle East, no way.
So just to recap, American ally Saudi Arabia, a country that's mostly Sunni, beheaded a prominent Shia cleric and angered the hell out of all the Shia countries, most notably Iran. And a group of Iranians set fire to the Saudi embassy in the country. The two countries severed all diplomatic ties, and yesterday Saudi Arabia apparently bombed the Iranian embassy in Yemen. Peter, the Sunni and Shiite countries are like forming coalitions now. It's already getting violent. What's going on?
There's a lot of things going on. I mean, the very short situation is that this is spinning further and further out of anyone's control. Once you set everybody into motion here, it gets very, very hard to tamp it down. And there's so many motivators to people's violence. There's religious motivators, there's political motivators, there's territorial and resource motivators. Once you get all that stuff going, it becomes a very, very difficult thing to slow down. And this is why people talk about comparisons to World War I. Not that this is a world war per se, but the idea of with World War I, you put so many pieces in motion that no one was able to stop the war from starting, even when some people wanted to stop it. So real quick, we've got Saudi and Iran are the two main powers in the Middle East. And they compete geopolitically as well as having their religious frictions, which just add to that and oftentimes create both the reason for fighting and sometimes an excuse for doing it. But basically, you've got a significant regional power struggle going on here. The Saudis are on the losing end of that currently. They have lost a lot of their influence in places like Syria. They've had it pulled out from underneath them in Iraq, which is currently used to be a secular country with a Sunni based government that fought against the Shias of Iran. Now, thanks to the United States invasion, which tipped over the whole cart, you've got a Shia country in Iraq that is hand in glove with Iran. That's Iranian power growing, Sunni power falling down. At the same time, oil prices are falling precipitously. The Saudis have a $107 billion deficit that they're not in a position to make up with falling oil prices. And one of their largest customers, and certainly their protector, the United States, is far more energy independent than it's ever been. The Saudis are in a rough spot.
Thanks, Obama.
Yeah, thanks, Obama. So throw in then the problems that are going on inside Fort Asshole in Riyadh. You've got a king there that was not appointed following the traditional succession of the monarchy. The old guy that died last year sometime appointed, I think it's his nephew, who has set up, the nephew's son is set up to be the next king. This whole line of succession cut out all the brothers. You've got, and when the brothers get angry, things go bad. You've got a whole bunch of people, this is Game of Thrones, you've got a whole bunch of people internally who are not supporting the monarchy and who are talking about coups, who are talking about overthrows. Funny words are being used. At that point, if you're Saudi, you're going to lash out, and that's what you're seeing. You're seeing stirring up external troubles to take people's minds off it inside the country, and you're stirring up external troubles in hopes that you can push the Iranians back in Yemen, in Syria, and maybe, cross your fingers, if you can really do it, bring the United States in on your own side, on the Saudi side. It's a mess, and I can't see anything good in the near to midterm coming out of this. Long term in the Middle East, anybody who tries to predict long term is a fool. But certainly into the midterm, this is, like the thing goes, there will be blood.
Certainly, I don't think there's going to be anything good, but how bad can it get? This is a region that's certainly no stranger to armed conflict. How bad can things get between Iran and Saudi Arabia if they're already, exchanging embassy missiles?
Well,
how bad can they get? They can get real bad. Imagine some type of upheaval in Saudi Arabia, an Arab Spring, a military coup, something that turns what has been a stable nation into a very unstable nation. Keep in mind, 10 to 15% of Saudi's population are Shias. They share a border with Yemen, which right now is a chaotic state. They have Syria, which is a chaotic state. So you could have Saudi Arabia in a semi-chaotic situation. You could even have some form of internal, it wouldn't quite qualify as a civil war, but certainly civil strife. You could have an angry Saudi regime decide to acquire or create a nuclear weapon, which would immediately force the Iranians to do the same thing. You could see a loose situation in Saudi that frightens the Israelis into some form of action. There's so many sparks. You just pick the one that has to go off, and things will get real bad. The Iranians have weapons that can reach, missiles that can reach into Saudi Arabia. The Saudis have the same. Everybody's got oil tankers transiting through the Gulf. If you can find a way to trick the United States into getting involved, and that doesn't seem to be very hard in the Middle East, then you have the Russians. I could go on for hours coming up with scenarios, but again, you just need that one spark in this area, and it'll be hard to put the fire out.
Josh, you and Peter are strangers to regions with Shiite-Sunni conflicts. What do you think happens next?
Well, I think that the more important than that religious struggle, I think it's the religious pursuit of money that makes this more interesting than, say, other dust-ups in the past. Iran's sanctions have gone away and are going away. They're getting back into the world stage, and that was sort of one thing that Saudi Arabia had exclusivity over, which was being sort of like the Muslim leader of the world, because Iranians was basically the Muslim enemy of the world. So since that dynamic is changing, plus Iran's getting involved with OPEC, and the oil prices are as low as they are, there's a lot less. 10 years ago this wouldn't have happened because there's a lot of money to lose. Oil was at its height, and there was just way too much money to be made to be bothered fighting about it. Now that it's like $30 a barrel or whatever it is recently, and the economy globally is shaky with China right now, the fact that oil is so low, I think, could lead to a kind of unrest and a kind of lack of control that we're not used to seeing from Saudi Arabia, especially. And the other interesting thing too, and I didn't know if you really mentioned this, Peter, is that Saudi Arabia is getting sort of it from both sides. They're getting it from the Iran Shia side, but then they're also getting it from the international stage from their extreme, which is ISIS, and Islamic State. They are the sort of the extreme version. What would be interesting is if Saudi Arabia declared war on Iran or something like that, would they accept the Islamic State's help? I mean, that is the Sunni-Shia conflict that everyone dreading, or, would it not get that far? As Peter said, there's way more unknown unknowns than known unknowns, and I think that's what makes this a particularly touchy time for these kind of dust-ups.
Let me pick up on the Sunni thing, because we have to keep in mind that whenever we talk about these groups, Sunni, Shia, whatever, I mean, there's far more nuances involved in any of these than one word will cover. But in particular, what scares the poo out of the Saudis is
language.
What scares the shit out of the Saudis is the way is ISIS and is Al Qaeda, because those two organizations, in a list of things they don't like around the world, have already sworn to destroy the Saudi monarchy. They believe that the Saudi monarchs are apostates, that they are non-believers, that they are an insult to Islam. And all these young Saudi men who are already disgruntled at home, who go off to jihad, the ones that come back to Saudi come back, as Americans would describe it, radicalized. They've been to jihad. They have internalized this different version of Islam that would not support the Saudi monarchy, they represent an extraordinary internal threat to the Saudi government. Let me throw one more religious situation out there, and this is depending maybe a little far-fetched, but let's think it through. Saudi Arabia in Arabic is also referred to as the keeper or the protector of the two shrines. The holiest sites in Islam are inside of Saudi Arabia, and the Saudis, in addition to running their country and everything, have this worldwide duty for 1 billion Muslims of protecting Mecca and Medina and the holy shrines there. They also have the duty globally of facilitating the Hajj, the thing that every Muslim is supposed to try to do, get him or herself to Saudi Arabia and make this spiritual journey. Imagine, if you will, ISIS or someone deciding that the monarchy is no longer able to fulfill its duties as a protector of these shrines, and there's some kind of attempt to take over those areas, to seize control of them. You've got a situation then when you're looking at perhaps the Saudi military shooting at Sunnis inside of Mecca. I mean, it can get nutty really, really quickly, and particularly if it takes place during the Hajj, when it's going to be very obvious that Saudis can't protect the people there. Again, it only takes a little spark, and this whole thing is going to go to hell very, very quickly.